Good evening, everyone. My name is Dick Prouty, working with the Lanesville Community Center. We had planned a debate this evening between Greg Verga and Safadia Romeo Thakin, and unfortunately the mayor has had some difficulty dealing with all of the events of the past 2 days of the storm and so forth, and wasn't able to attend. So what we've done is we've gone to the next best thing. We're going to take the questions that were going to be part of the debate. I'm going to ask Greg Verga those questions, and he's going to go through approximately 5-minute answers to each one. And then we're going to do something similar with the mayor on Sunday, and they're both going to be available at the same time. Mr. Verga's will be on 1623, and the mayor will be on KPN Live. And people will be able to see both responses to our questions, which we think are sort of a thoughtful and different look at the mayor's race and some topical questions. So question number one, Greg, is, and both of these candidates were given the questions ahead of time. They've had a chance to think about them, but I'll just, for the audience, let the audience know the questions. Basically, we think that Gloucester's sort of at a turning point, a tipping point. We've got a lot of interest. We've been discovered, and we have a lot of people coming to the city. We have more traffic. Recent open space and recreation survey had 826 respondents found that 52% said they were either concerned or very concerned about non-residents using open space. We fear that our rich economic and cultural diversity and our culture is possibly under threat. And so we wonder, Greg, what you've been hearing from residents. We think this is a common apprehension. Mm-hmm. We wonder what you've been hearing and how you would deal with these issues as mayor.
Yeah, it's sort of a common thread when I've been out door knocking on over 1,000 doors and making calls, but this might be an extreme opinion from some people. We don't want to have the sign at the Rotary say, welcome to Gloucester, now go home. You know, that's the last thing we want to do. But it's understandable that people are concerned about open space and maybe reaching that critical tipping point you mentioned. You know, we took steps when I was on the city council, when we had the problem with the quarries in Lanesville specifically, making a lot of resident-only parking. And I understand that cut down a little bit for a little while, but we were discovered. And the social media has been, I think, the enemy of Gloucester in terms of that, because it became, hey, well, come see the quarries. And that's what really boosted the tourist season on the quarries. So what can we do to make it better? That's a great question. One of the things that's a result of it is traffic. Well, parking, first of all, in the neighborhoods. You know, people having cars all over the streets and blocking driveways, etc. And I guess it's 7 o'clock now. So the idea of making the resident only was to keep those people moving and still going to the quarries, but it cut down on the traffic, the parking in the neighborhoods. Traffic is going to be an ongoing thing we have to tackle. One of the things I suggested the other night is temporary traffic lights at some of the pinch points throughout town. I mentioned the most infamous one, to me at least, is George's Coffee Shop. So if we were to...
I ate there today.
Yes. And
I actually parked on Pine Street and walked because I knew it.
You knew what was coming.
I knew I couldn't find a parking place.
Right. So by starting with the temporary traffic lights, we can do a study. We know the pinch points, George's, and there are other key ones throughout the city. We set those up, see how they work, and if they're effective, then we make the decision, are we going to go with permanent traffic lights? And if the decision is they didn't work or it's not what we want to do, then we scrap it and we go with something else. But we have to finally tackle the traffic problem. And we need a master plan so we know what the goals and the dreams are of the city as a whole. With the last ones from 1999, 2000, 20 plus years old. It's time to revisit that. We didn't really do everything that was in the master plan, but either way, it's 20 years old, a lot of it's outdated. We're talking about dial-up internet back then, and now it's a whole different world. So those are ways that I think we can try to preserve what we have by knowing what people are really looking for. I think this may be, the 826 respondents, I think may be an extreme, because this is not really the bulk of what I heard when I was going door to door. So I'm not saying that those 826 are not, the 52% of the 826 are off base, but I don't think it's the pressing issue citywide.
Okay, so question number 2. Some Gloucester residents say that when people raise concerns about the direction of the change in the city, that they're just yearning for the good old days, unquote, and are holding up development that will be good for all of us. What is your take on this? As mayor, would you try and bring all sides of our community together in an approach the city preserves what is best from our past and present, while also supporting innovation and change?
Absolutely. Oh, you still wanted the question?
Well, what would you consider to be some of the major elements of a balanced approach? So,
I
pick it apart a little bit and give us a little
Yeah,
bit of
yeah.
detail in your philosophy. How'd you?
I'm sure there is, to some degree, there is a yearning for the good old days. But, you know, the city today is much different than it was when I was in high school, much different than it was when I was in elementary school, and pretty different from when my grandfather came here in 1912. You know, so we do have to innovate, we do have to advance, or, you know, we'll perish. So where do we find the balance? Well, part of it is getting the people involved. I think that was part of your question, having,
Yeah.
you know, public involvement. The first thing we need to do is have more cooperation at the city government level. You know, I've been talking about transparency, efficiency, and collaboration. I think that's sadly missing right now between the mayor's office and the city council, among the city council, and the school committee has been pretty good. But my point is, those three bodies have got to work together. They don't have to be in lockstep, but if they're at least professional and they're respectful to one another, that sets the tone right down the line for the employees, right down to the general public. So then we can get the public involved because they feel, okay, this is a government that's running pretty efficiently. They seem to be interested in what we're saying. But one of the other things about involvement is, I don't want to say it's a benefit, but one of the few positives of COVID is the Zoom meetings that have, by necessity, have taken place. When I was on the city council and on the school committee, on the city council specifically, we'd be deliberating a $120 million budget. And there'd be 9 of us at the dais plus the city clerk, and the audience would be completely empty. You know, public hearing about how we're spending $120 million. Zoom meetings have really brought the people right in from their own kitchens and living rooms. I know there's a move among the administration now to basically scrap all the Zoom meetings. We should be looking at, if we can, by legally, a hybrid model at the very least, because the participation rate, and I don't mean people tuning in and, you know, raising their hand and speaking at public comment, but at least people logging in to watch the meeting is through the roof. The ratings for our meetings are doing really well, you know, according to the Nielsen results. So we need to continue that, because if people are watching government every day and they can just go scroll down and watch any open space meeting, boom, boom, you know, they want to see the city council standing committees, school committee, that's a great thing for the city. And if we continue with the minimum, a bare minimum of having the hybrid, I think that's going to only keep this participation, this involvement going. So there's no surprises, or let me rephrase that, there'll be less surprises between what's happening at City
Well, we
Hall.
just had a school committee debate, and they said that they want to model hybrid learning and continue to do that.
Hybrid learning or the meetings?
Meetings.
Yes, yes.
Learning, and because they think that hybrid learning will continue in the schools. So
Right.
that was interesting. I mean, at least the veterans did.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. Okay. Thank you so much. The at-large city council debate we had at the Lanesville Community Center was interesting. There was a dominant theme was the need to increase the levels and ways in which people participate in the affairs of the city government. They said there was a great need, the candidates all agreed there was a great need to listen more to what our fellow residents want from for our community. Mm-hmm. What in your view is the reason for a continuing slide in participation? Now you just sort of addressed this, so maybe you can follow it up from a different angle, but
Yeah.
why has there been less interest, and how do we get more people involved?
Right. Well, I mean, I think COVID has, though it's brought people in via their living rooms, it still has created a bit of disinterest because they're focused on their family and their health too. But I think we can moving forward, more interaction, more cooperation between the mayor's office and the ward council, especially, if not the full city council. But the mayor and the ward councils can be working more closely with the residents in the wards. I'm thinking of Val Gilman had a ward meeting at Corliss Landing. Ward meeting might be a stretch. It was more like she was a punching bag, verbally anyway, at that meeting. There should have been somebody from the administration.
And the issue was
This was
speeding?
about public-private roads,
Oh.
the condition of the roads, Apple Street specifically being a feeder road to a public landing. So that's one thing I've been talking about through this campaign, is trying to address the public-private road controversy. But if
And you, I think, just for the audience, what percentage of Gloucester's roads are public and what percentage are private? I think you know the answer.
Yeah, it's about 40%, I believe, is private. Of the 150 miles of road, I'm told 50 miles are private. And most people have no clue that their road is private. Unless you're really scouring through your deed. As a real estate agent, whenever I listed a house, the first step I would do, sorry to go off on a tangent, but I would call the DPW and say, I'm listing a house at 123, Sesame Street. Is it public or private? And then I would list it into the MLS as public or private, because I didn't want to get sued later. but I think it's important that you have the conversation with the buyers that, okay, this is a private road. This is how it works. You own.
And that means that.
In most cases, you own to the center line of your road. Your neighbor across the street owns to the center line from their side. And you're technically responsible for the care and maintenance of your road. In the past, the city would at least fill potholes on private roads. The current administration made a conscious decision 6 or 7 years ago that they were no longer doing that. So those potholes that would have been patched at this size are now, you could drop a Beetle, Volkswagen Beetle in there and lose it. And it's just gotten out of hand where the road conditions are horrible. I actually met with some firefighters the other day.
So let's redirect this. So
Yeah.
this means, in terms of getting people to participate.
Yeah, we sort of went on a tangent. But the point was that meeting, that,
Yeah.
ward councils tend to go out and have meetings, whether they're in a room like this or on site like that one. But they're on their own. And as a former ward councilor, you have, I know firsthand, there's nothing you can do except say, let me bring it back to the administration or the DPW. And then because you have no power to direct the DPW to do anything. So
You can't say, go fill that pothole.
Exactly. So you make the request and then you just sort of hope that it happens. And I'm not talking just private roads, any road. So if someone from the administration were there, they would be able to have answered, I don't mean the mayor or the CAO or anybody, but somebody to be able to bounce the questions off. When you have 25 people there and they're asking questions, the ward council's like, I don't know, I'll have to get back to you. It
Okay,
can
so
create a bit of a friction
You're-
between.
If I hear you right, you're saying there should be administration people attending some of these ward meetings.
Some of them, yeah, not every single one, but
Yeah.
certainly one like that was, you could have predicted was going to be a bit controversial.
Yep.
So a better relationship between the ward councilors. And I've said this at previous forum, but I know there are people running for city council that are not voting for me. I know that because they told me. So when I'm elected to be the mayor, and if they are elected to the city council, that the fact that they didn't vote for me is irrelevant. Because their constituents are my constituents. So I'm not going to have favorites on the city council. I'm not going to have a naughty list and a nice list. Every city council is going to have equal access because the benefit is to their constituents, as I said, are my constituents too. So that helps. You don't have to have 9 councilors in lockstep with the mayor, but you have to have at least a mutual understanding of respect and professionalism, and we're all in this together, and we're going to make it work to the best of our ability. You don't have to necessarily go out and have coffee or beer with them after, but do what you need to do.
Great. Okay, to keep on our schedule, next question is about sustainable development. And it's defined as balancing the needs for economic growth and job creation, but also environmental protection, equity for the socioeconomic groups that are below average in our community, which we have identified
Yes.
environmental justice communities, and the quality of life. So how would you see the components of the sustainable development for Gloucester going forward, and what's the formula that supports youth coming into the labor force, workers in the trades, the fishermen, all these different forces? How would you balance those within our city to get a sustainable approach?
Right, well, this is, I think we need 2 hours to answer this question.
Well, you got
But
5 minutes.
Okay, let me just rush right through it.
No, I mean, give me the headlines. Give me the
Yeah, I
headlines.
think that one of the key issues that we have here, which is no secret, is the housing shortage and the affordable housing shortage. So as a real estate agent, I saw it. It's basic economics, supply versus demand. You know, if you have, over the last couple of years, there have been very few houses, relatively speaking, going on the market, and multiple buyers. You list a house, I listed one in my old neighborhood, sold for $542,000. It wasn't a
It wasn't that 3 years ago.
It wasn't that 3 years ago, and it certainly wasn't that when I was a kid. But when you list the house and then you have 24 people come to the open house the first day, then you get multiple offers, many of those offers over asking, many of those are way over asking. You know, you can't tell the homeowner, you really should sell to the local guy for 300, even though this guy's offering 550. You know, so low demand, low supply, high demand. So we have to get a handle on the number of units that are available. And a lot of it has been going through the housing production plan, which came out in 2017. It actually expires in 2022 in June. But some of the recommendations have happened. You know, the accessory buildings to change to that. So before you can only, say, apartment above a garage, you can only rent to family. Now that's been expanded, so you can rent outside family. By right, it hasn't made the city council yet, but the planning board has approved to take a one family to a two family. One of the things that I heard watching it.
Do you favor that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
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 So everybody with a one family should, by right, have the ability to make it a two family.
Yeah, within reason, within
You know,
the
I know.
permitting
You know,
process.
I'll tell you right now, I've got a one family. My wife has passed away. I'm going to take the top floor and make it a rental unit. And I'll be on the first floor, so I don't have to climb those stairs.
Right, and it helps somebody who might not be able to hang on to their house by adding that second unit. I mean, my father built a second unit on his house years ago, just thinking ahead of that would be a source of income.
Right.
And it's beneficial today for him. But one of the factoids that one of the planning board members said at a meeting I was watching on Zoom was some of these areas of town, by right, you could buy a lot of land and put a two-family. In the same area, you could buy a single family, rip it down, and build a two-family. But you couldn't add a second unit to your existing one family. I mean, right there, that sounds like something that was overlooked that should have been addressed.
Mm-hmm.
So by a thorough review of the zoning ordinances, a continuation of the review of these recommendations for the housing production plan, we can add units. Affordable housing is a similar but a whole different story. We have the Affordable Housing Trust. And there was a commitment made by this administration to put the tax revenue from short-term rentals into the Affordable Housing Trust. But so what I've been told is it's never made it there. So I would first thing as mayor is redirect that funding there.
You support the housing trust.
I support them getting that tax.
And you support putting short-term rental income in
Yes, absolutely.
How much do you think that is? We talking hundreds of thousands, a million?
A million, I doubt millions, but it's probably in the several tens of thousands, but it builds up over time.
Yep, okay.
So step one is you put that in the trust, and then the trust has some funds to work with. And then you empower, as the mayor, the Affordable Housing Trust and the Community Preservation Committee to be more proactive to find new opportunities to add units. We, the city, own lots of land, not a whole bunch of lots, but building lots of land sprinkled throughout the city. We could be looking at those and possible disposition of those to a developer. We sell it for a cut rate, and we say the trade-off is you have to have a deed restriction that it's affordable housing. So that's, by creating the housing, that creates opportunities for all these groups we had talked about who don't necessarily have the ability to pay the Gloucester rate, fair market rate.
And in fact, the direction is the other way.
Yes, exactly.
People who grew up here would like to stay, whether they're fishermen or teachers or firemen.
And
they often have to move
Yes,
50 miles away.
Exactly. And a lot of people who live in houses that they bought cheap from their family or inherited, if they had to buy a house today, they couldn't, you know? So it is a serious issue. There's no magic wand to make this happen. It's going to be incremental steps, but it's the recognition of the problem and finding these little baby steps that we can do to start to chip away at it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we were going to go to what we're going to call a quick round of specific challenges
Yep.
within the sustainable development area.
Mm-hmm.
And you've just spoken to affordable housing,
Right.
so I don't think we need to.
Don't need to beat that anymore.
We don't need to go for there.
Yeah.
But what about overdevelopment? Some people believe that we have overdevelopment. For example, if you drive out from the traffic circle to my house in Lanesville, you'll see a fair amount of new roads.
Yeah.
Is that overdevelopment, or is that creating new housing for people that need it?
I would say it's if maybe overdevelopment's a bit of a stretch, but it's certainly concerning development. Does that sound like a fair way to put this? You know, because as I said, this is not the same city it was in 1912. But I do know that I live on Essex Ave, and when the sewer came by our house in 2006 or so, a lot of wooded land on 133 are now new, duplexes. So the sewer has really, it enabled the development out in West Gloucester. But there are a lot of areas of West Gloucester that are still in septic system that are going through this concerning development. One of the things we need to do goes back to what I said about the review of the zoning ordinance. One thing we also need to do is look at a blasting ordinance, which, believe it or not, we don't have. We have tons and tons of granite being blasted to smithereens, and there is no ordinance to regulate that.
You mean what can and what can't be blasted?
Right, or the steps and what
And
you have to
some
do.
communities have that?
Yeah, Manchester by the Sea, for instance, has it. So it's, as mayor, I would instruct the planning and development, the planning department to draft a blasting ordinance. Not hard to do. You go to Manchester, say, can we take a look at yours? And then we basically copy theirs and tweak it to fit us. But we have I'm trying to think of the right word. We have can't think of the right term, but a regulation on how much you can remove, how much fill you can remove from a site. But we don't have a regulation to determine how much fill you can create by blowing it up. So pretty straightforward as far as I'm concerned. So that would kind of help to get a handle on what's being developed, because there'd be tighter rules on it. It's concerning development, that's for sure.
All right, climate change.
Yeah. If we don't take climate change seriously, you can just forget all the other issues on this sheet of paper. You know what I'm saying? Because if we're underwater, or there's no clean air to breathe, or the ozone depletes, or whatever the other problems are, it doesn't matter about affordable housing, or it doesn't matter about how great our schools are. So this is the top of the agenda. We, the city, we had a recommendation to hire a climate director, a resiliency director. I'll call it a climate czar. And it should have happened. I don't know why we're waiting. You know, it should be done. Somebody, in my opinion, that should be at the level of it as a direct report to the mayor. Because if you put them under another manager, they don't have much power.
That was a question I had. They would report to the mayor.
Right, because if you put them under, let's say, Department X, under
Yeah.
another, they can't go to other department heads to
So
tell them
it's
what
a
to do.
cabinet level position.
Yeah,
And so, for example, they would be a peer of Mr. Hale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, this is a whole new concept in other cities and towns, so I can't lay out a 10-point plan of how it would work. But at the very least, that's where it has to be, because they're the one that will be connecting the dots for all these things.
Well, we have done some research, and Valerie Nelson's been on a committee,
Yeah.
and we've looked at where that's been done and how it's been done, and the most effective way, I think, is to have it at the cabinet level.
Right.
And give them the ability to ask every one of their peers, how are they doing with climate?
Right,
So-
exactly. And they'll be the one connecting the dots and make the recommendation to the mayor, and the mayor will take action based on that recommendation.
Okay. Mental health issues. Mental health issues have exploded in COVID. Now, how can the administration and how can you, as mayor, lead to help mental health issues?
It is a huge, serious issue, and you're right, it's been exacerbated by COVID and just the stress of dealing with it. One thing we could have done is we had a grant in hand for about, $300,000, $400,000 to deal with behavioral health. And because of interference from the mayor's office, we had to send the grant back. That would have been a huge step to put us in the right direction. But it's taken it seriously.
What department would that have been under?
It would have been through community development, and anyway, it's gone, so it's kind of irrelevant.
Okay.
If we can bring it back, that'd be awesome. And it wasn't just for us, it was for, it was a regional grant, so a lot of other cities and towns lost out on this because of
I see.
our inaction. So what we need to do as a community, as a city government, is to do what we can to help out the nonprofits like Action and others, that this is their day job, so to speak. Empower them. We have to make sure that we're advocating for resources and programs at our hospital, make sure we're not losing, advocate to keep from losing programs at our hospital. But it is a big one. It's going to be with us for many, many months, if not years. I mean, even when COVID goes away, it's going to have some lingering effects. Mental health is always a big issue, regardless, but COVID-related issues are going to live on long after the virus.
And how about support for our local artist community? A big part of our community is the local artists.
Yes, I mean, as a musician, it's important to me. You know, from the point of view of
What do you play?
I'm a bassist in the bands I played, and I'm also a guitar player.
Oh.
So I did bring it with me. Sorry,
That's okay.
next time. But yeah, I had talked to several of the different art organizations recently, and one that was pointed out, which seems like it's an obvious one, is just basic signage. They had requested signage at the Rotary, and they got the okay, and then at the last minute it was, sorry, we're not going to do that, just to point in the right directions of the different areas. I mean, we can't be pointing to every single artist's home studio, but there is
You mean like Rocky Neck?
right, exactly. And by you know, like when you're watching MASH and they have the signs pointing to all the capitals, something like that, throughout the city, pointing back to one another. But it also goes back to affordable housing, because supporting the artists has given them a place that they can have live space and or live workspace, you know, and that could be part of encouraging through incentives. You know, some of this funding will be getting from Uncle Sam, the second floor units on Main Street, you know, or other commercial properties that have opportunities for residential upstairs. On the first floor, the underutilized storefronts, there could be funding that could help offset the rents, so a landlord, instead of keep the place empty,
Good.
could
We're
have a
gonna
reduced
We're going
rate.
to keep moving here.
Okay.
So let's move to the fishing industry.
Yeah, so my grandfather came here in 1912 to fish. My son-in-law is a commercial lobsterman today. So this is our identity. America's oldest fishing port. I was told we're not the oldest seaport, we're the oldest fishing port. And that is a 400-year-old identity, and as we approach our 400th anniversary, we need to be ensuring that we are doing everything we can do to keep it healthy for the next 400 years. You know, that the blue economy is a huge part of us. The lobster industry actually is going gangbusters, but as
Mayoral.
yeah, and as the temperature rises in the water, they're all creeping further up north.
Yep.
You know, so again, comes back to global climate change. Again, as I said, that is the one. Forget all the other points if we're not dealing with that. So that is going to be a key thing to help the fishing industry, is to keep our tabs on climate change and everything we can do here locally. Unfortunately, a lot of what we're going to do here is just slowing it down. You know, and like the barrier at the around the sewer plant, or the wall at the high school. But we also have to be thinking forward about where's the high school going to be in 75 years. You know, we have to start thinking about that now, because you know, we can't wait till year 74 to decide. So again, it's fishing industry, it's our identity. We're going to do everything we can.
And then the use of I-4C2,
Yes.
as you know,
Yeah, I know.
from our Lanesville conversation, a pretty hot topic.
Yes.
And, you know, where do you stand on the entertainment complex?
Yeah.
And the ability to have something in I-4C that is not part of the current legislation?
Right. So yeah, this is. I can't wait to tune into the mayor's interview next week, because I've yet to hear her take a stand on the I-4C2 and or the Performance Center, even though she did write a letter of support for their feasibility study grant. That being said, I've said it many times. I think I've been pretty clear about it. When I was on the city council about 10 years ago, we bought I-4C2. And I have said then, and I've said right through to today, I did not vote to spend $1.5 million of taxpayer money on a parking lot. That being said, a parking lot is not an allowable use in the designated port area. We're on our second waiver. We got a 5-year waiver when I was on the council. Subsequent councils got a second 5-year waiver, and I think we only have a couple years left on it. So we really have to determine what we're going to do. My view, the Performance Center, while it's an intriguing idea, it's only one idea. I don't want us to say, let's just go whole hog on the Performance Center, see if it's going to work. No, as mayor, I'm going to say, hey, world, what have you got for ideas? And I would like us as a city to take in multiple ideas so we can weigh them and see which one works, if any. And that, because if it's not related to marine industrial, fishing related, it's got to have changes, like you said, to the regulations. So if we get these ideas, then the mayor's going to have to get behind the change through the legislature. The city council is going to have to get behind the change. And I'm pretty sure that me as mayor and the city council aren't going to support a change to designated port area if we don't have the support of the public. So transparency is the big one here. I want to say, what are the ideas? Let's bring them in. Public, we want you here every step of the way. And then in the end, we'll determine whether or not we're going to make the change.
Okay, and then we'll move on. Thank you. That's clear. Want to move on to the last question. And so, how has Gloucester performed in meeting the extraordinary challenges of COVID?
Mm-hmm.
This is a question that the at-large city candidates addressed, and they thought we had done a great job. I'm not sure. Do you agree? Where would you see room for improvement? Mm-hmm. And are there any lessons we can learn about moving forward together? If we've done a great job, how can we use that lesson to move it forward together with other issues that are like COVID? Because COVID isn't the only difficult question we have.
Oh yeah, I mean, something similar will happen again that challenges us. I mean, maybe not a pandemic, but something will happen. So there are lessons to be learned. We did a good job. You know, there were some bumps in the road, and as it's been said many times, there is no handbook. There was no handbook for how to handle a pandemic of this magnitude. So it was sort of like building the airplane at 30,000 feet. One of the lessons that we learned is we need to be sure that the departments, the administration of the departments, stay within their lanes. You know, the mayor appoints people to department heads, and the mayor has to empower them, encourage them, give them oversight, but not interfere. So that is one of the lessons we should take from this is there shouldn't have been these parallel paths of how we're going to do tracing, how we're going to distribute vaccines, how we're going to just disseminate information. So that is one lesson. Get the right people in the health department, let them do their job. You know, constantly communicating so you know what's going on as the mayor, there's no surprises. So that is the key. Personal stories, my wife is a nurse. She works at Beverly Hospital. My daughter's a nurse. She works at Middleton Jail. So I would see my wife getting up to go to work, 4 days a week, and she'd be coming home 13 hours later with the red marks all over her face from wearing a N95 all day long. And my daughter, same thing, going off to her job. And I would be sitting home saying, is my wife going to bring something home? Is she going to come home sick?
Mm-hmm.
Try to worry about it. Is she going to bring something home to me? Is my daughter going to bring something home to my grandkids? Mm-hmm. So I get a little bit, when people talk about the vaccines, it becomes a political issue about vaccine effectiveness or, mask effectiveness. Those were the tools we had, and to this day, the tools we have. And those people out there who did not live with that kind of first-hand, frontline workers in their home, I think they might be taking it for granted that how dangerous it was. If you can work from home on your Zoom, it's not the same as having your wife and daughter going off into a facility.
Well, and what would you say the primary lesson that we can learn? So one sentence, what's the primary lesson we can learn?
We can, like I say, let the professionals do their job.
Okay. Very interesting. So thank you so much, Greg Verga, and we look forward to what's going to happen on November 2nd. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah.
And good luck to you.
Thank you so much.